right, so last part of this lecture we talked about observational research. Now we're going to talk about survey research. So giving somebody a ton of questions and seeing how they respond. Maybe we look at correlations between certain questions. This is typically how we might do political kind of studies. This is typically how we might do personality type studies. A lot of studies in psychology, especially in the corona age, are done online, and we collect a lot of information from surveys. So let's talk about two major kinds of survey questions. The first kind of questions are open-ended questions. Here we get the subject to write in or type in an answer. So some examples of this: what's your favorite part of your job? What's your most defining attribute? All right, so we get somebody to actually respond to this. Now, the great thing about open-ended questions is we get a lot of data, and we get a lot more data than if we told subjects to mark this box or this other box. We get a ton of data, but it's hard to analyze the answers to these questions, right? How do you quantify and do statistics on what is someone's favorite part of the job? And how about if they say something that's somewhat similar? How do you combine them in certain ways? So for instance, if someone says the favorite part of their job is vacation hours, and someone says vacation hours, and somebody else says time off, well, those mean kind of the same thing, but how do you combine them? And we could get a human being to do this, but if our survey has tons and tons of people, a very large sample size, it might be very difficult to do this. So this is one of the downsides of open-ended questions. They give us a lot of specific information, which is a good thing, but it's hard to quantify the answers to these questions. Right? We are creating some computer programs to analyze open-ended questions via text analytic programs to get a computer to go over and see what are the common themes in answers to questions. But those are not perfect, all right? So there are some downsides with open-ended questions. We compare this with forced choice questions. Here, a subject has to endorse a particular answer choice. Okay, some good examples of these are true-false questions. Okay, so do you enjoy spending time outside? True or false? You pick one of those. It's easy to do statistics with these. We can see how many people, what the percentage of people that said true, the percentage of people that said false, and we can correlate how people respond to this to a wide variety of outcomes. Another good example of this are Likert type questions. And notice that that is Likert and not Likert. Some people say Likert, but the psychologist that this was named after pronounced his name Likert, so that's how we're going to pronounce it. Here's a good example of a Likert type scale. All right, maybe we've got 5 items, or maybe we've got 5 answer choices, maybe we got 7, but we rate ourselves on how much we agree with this statement, how it might match our personality, or something like that. Strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, no opinion, somewhat agree, strongly agree. These anchors, these terms up here vary a little bit, but the general structure of the Likert type scale is pretty similar. And you've seen these things everywhere, right? You see them when you're completing any kind of survey. So for instance, like if you go to dinner at Applebee's and Applebee's wants to take a survey afterwards and you get a free like ice cream or something, you're going to see a lot of Likert type items. Okay, surveys are something that we do quite frequently, even though we might not participate in that many psychology studies or experiments. We do surveys all the time. All right, here's one good example of a survey. Rate my professor. So at the end of every course, your course evaluations, you are asked to complete a survey. All right, so maybe we have some true-false kind of questions, forced choice. Would you take the professor again? Yes or no. We also might have a sliding scale. So a Likert type response to rating your professor, 0 being the worst professor ever, 5 being the best. All right, so we encounter these surveys quite frequently in our everyday lives, and not always in the context of psychology. I mean, many times when you go to, like I said, a restaurant at some company, some business, you get people to fill out surveys. All right. So we have to be mindful when we are doing survey research to write our questions in an appropriate way. If we write our questions in an inappropriate way, we're going to get really bad data. Our subjects are going to be confused, and they might not give us their honest answer choices. So here's some things that we want to make sure that we avoid. We want to avoid leading questions. Questions that when we ask them, we're expecting a certain answer. Now, subjects are nice for the most part, and they might try to confirm our research hypothesis. So if we ask a leading question, they're likely to say yes to whatever it is that we ask. Here is an example of a potentially leading question. Recent scientific research suggests that the planet is becoming hotter due to our carbon footprint. Do you agree that humans should rely more on solar energy? Because of that thing beforehand, it seems that the person that's administering this survey, that's asking the question, has a particular opinion. So you're more likely to get someone that says, yeah, human beings should rely more on solar energy. But really, what's causing them to say yes is not their true beliefs, but how you ask the question. And again, with psychology, with any science, we want to get the truth. We don't want just to get the answer that we have already determined should be the correct answer, right? So a better way of asking this question is just get rid of that first part. Do you agree that humans should rely more on solar energy? All right, and that way we get rid of that leading aspect of this question. So researchers must try to word their questions as neutrally as possible without letting the subject know what are our opinions, what are we expecting from them, leading them to give a certain response. All right, another kind of question that we want to avoid are double-barreled questions. Double-barreled questions are essentially two questions in one. So if we get somebody to respond to it, we don't know if they're responding to the first part of the question, the second part of the question, or both parts of the question. So let me give you an example of this. Do you agree that chimpanzees are humans' closest relatives and that we should stop deforestation to save them? Okay, we're asking two separate things here. Do you agree that that chimpanzees are humans' closest relatives? Okay, they might be responding on that aspect of the question. And that we should stop deforestation to save them. That's another aspect, okay? So we don't know if someone says no, are they disagreeing with chimpanzees being humans' closest relatives, or are they disagreeing with the fact that we should stop deforestation? We don't know, okay? So we have to be careful not to ask double-barreled questions because, again, we don't know when they respond to it, what part of the question they are specifically looking at. Well, here's another good example of a double-barreled question. Was your time at UNG affordable and enlightening? Okay, you might say yes, but maybe you're referring specifically to enlightening and not affordable. Maybe you might say no, but maybe UNG was more enlightening than it was affordable. These are two separate questions, and it's going to muddy the water in how participants respond, because participants are going to respond differently to these questions. Some people might look more towards the affordable aspect of it and answer based off of that. Some people might look more towards the enlightening aspect of this. So what we should do with double-barreled question is try to break them down into multiple questions as opposed to just asking them in a singular question. So maybe we might say, do you agree that chimpanzees are humans' closest relatives? Period. And see how you respond to that. And then we say, do you believe that we should stop deforestation to save chimpanzees? Yes or no? Human beings, new researchers have a tendency to assume that human beings in their study are smart and are always paying attention. And that is false, okay? Sometimes you're going to be dealing with individuals that are not going to read things very carefully. You've been working with the study for quite some time. You know how to do the task. You know how to answer the questions because you're the one that wrote the questions. But you got to look at things through a naive mindset. And one thing that we can clearly see with this is negatively worded questions are confusing. They might not be confusing to you because you wrote them, but anytime you use a negatively worded question, it's going to cause there to be some attentional strain on your subjects, and they might be confused and give you the exact opposite answer compared to what they intended to do. Okay, how about this question? I do not like to spend time outdoors. All right, now pretty straightforward enough. If you go higher, you prefer to be inside. But we're talking about the outdoors, okay? So that might be a little bit confusing. All right, if you do a lower score, this means that you like the outdoors more. So here, it's a little bit confusing what we mean here by giving a higher score on a Likert scale or a lower score. Okay, now again, you might look at this and like, no, it's pretty easy for me, but anytime you're getting people to do some kind of mental gymnastics and think about how they answer the question, you're likely to get some messy data. All right, here's a question. Abortion should never be restricted. All right, what does this mean? Okay, well, I've got to do some mental gymnastics now. So if I have a high score, that means that I agree with this statement. So abortion should never be restricted. So that must mean that I am pro-choice if I score high on this. If I have a low score, that means I disagree with this. So abortion should never be restricted. So that must mean that I'm more pro-life. All right, but see, I have to stop and think about what my answer choice is going to indicate. And I might get incorrect data, and my data is going to look a lot messy. And we don't want that. Messy data, first of all, is inaccurate, and we're unlikely to find any significant effects if our data is messy, if there's more natural variability due to some confounding variable that people just don't know how to answer the question. All right, do you not like all trucks except Fords? I don't even know what this question is getting at, okay? Agree or disagree? Does agree mean I like Fords or don't like Fords? I don't even know. It's just a crazy way to ask a question. So we need to be mindful to try to get rid of as many negatively worded questions as we can. I would say that this first one is not necessarily awful, but I might change this. Instead of saying I do not like to spend time outdoors, I might say I like to spend time indoors. And that's getting at the same thing that this question is, but just looking at it in a little bit different way. All right, so those are some problems in the wording of the questions. But anytime we get somebody to do survey research, people might have some biases that lead us to come up with incorrect conclusions. One huge problem is social desirability. People, when they are responding to a survey, might respond in a way to make themselves look better than they actually are. All right, especially if they're applying for a job. Let's say we have somebody take a personality test for their job. It's like, are you a nice human being? Yes, I'm the nicest of all human beings. Are you hardworking? Yes, I'm the most hardworking. So someone might lie to us, okay? Lie to us either about their personality, their cognitive ability, whatever it is that we're doing a survey. They might lie to try to make themselves look better. So that is problematic, and we have to figure out a way to try to control for this. Another problem, sometimes subjects are lazy. Okay, they might have an acquiescence response set. An acquiescence response set is where the subject draws you a pretty Christmas tree of all the bubbles in a Scantron test, where they mark all 5s or mark all 3s or mark all 1s or whatever it is. They just haven't stopped paying attention, and they're giving you the same response again and again and again and again. Very problematic. We got to think about what we need to do in this sort of situation, how to identify subjects that are not paying attention. Third, subjects might have a fence-setting response. So here they are very non-committal. All right, they want to be in the average of everything. So they pick the middle choice every single time. It takes them a whole lot to go to one of the extremes. So all of these biases are going to lead us to have some messy data. So what can we do to try to prevent these problems? All right, first let's try to tackle social desirability. Well, for research, this is a little bit easier to do. You can say, hey, your data is going to be anonymous, and we're not looking at your data or sending it to your employer. So people are likely to be more honest for us in research than they would be if they were applying for a job. Two, one thing that we might do is include a lie scale. All right, include a lie scale. Have some questions that are almost impossible for someone to disagree with. So how about the question, have you ever lied? At any point in time, have you ever lied? Now, everybody at some point in time in their life has lied. And if they say no to this, it's probably the case that they're lying to us right now. And so we can tell that this subject has very high social desirability and that their data might not be that good. All right, how about this other question? Sometimes I feel bad about things that I have done. Okay, everybody should say true. Everybody has done something that they have felt ashamed of. If the person says false and they never lie and that they are perfect in every way, it's probably the case that they're lying to us. It's probably the case that we should not trust their data. So we can either remove them from our data set because, again, they scored so poorly on our lie scale or our social desirability scale, sometimes we call it. Or we can try to statistically control for the influence of social desirability using some fancy statistics. How about an acquiescence response set? Well, there's a couple things that we can do. We can include some catch questions. So if you're paying attention, circle neutral. So that's one way, and anybody that doesn't do that clearly is not paying attention, and we can throw their data away. Another thing that we can do is include some reverse scored questions that maybe if we're measuring a personality trait like extroversion, that if you score a 5 on a Likert scale, that means that you're extremely extroverted. We might include a mirror reversed question that a 5 means that you're extremely introverted. So if you're marking all 5s going down, sometimes it means you're extremely extroverted, sometimes it means that you're extremely introverted. Extreme scores are likely to sway your data more than scores towards the average. And this is a property of the statistics that we use. So it is important for us to try, if somebody's marking all 5s or marking all 1s, that if they are doing that, that we toss them towards the middle. So if we have half of our questions reverse coded, and the other half non-reverse coded or normal, then this is, if someone marks all 5, this is going to put them smack dab in the middle of the trait. And again, we might be able to identify these subjects and remove them from our data set or try to statistically control for it, although that would be a little bit more difficult. I had a professor at Georgia Tech that did something particularly sadistic that I loved and would have people make comparisons of faces. It was about an hour-and-a-half long study. And in the end, he would show you 5 of the same comparisons that you made early on. Now, since they're the same exact questions, you should make the same answer choices. You should say this face is more attractive than this face. Same thing that you did earlier on. But if you miss or if you have a different answer choice for a large number of them, the experimenter would come in and say, you did not do a good job with this experiment. Doesn't seem like you're paying attention. And you get to do the experiment all over again. Wonderful. I love that. I think that that's a great thing to do. Subjects didn't really like that, but it's a good way to enforce subjects to pay attention, or at least threaten that to them. All right. Okay, so how we get rid of acquiescence response then. How about a fence-sitting response? Sometimes answer choices like no opinion or I don't know are problematic because they lead people to not give you an answer. I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm going to give you nooch. I'm going to give you absolutely nothing. So maybe we might remove these answer choices. We might remove the middle option from a Likert type scale. So instead of having a 7-point scale, we have a 6-point scale. And that way someone has to make a decision if they're more towards the lower end of the distribution or the higher end of the distribution. They either slightly disagree or slightly agree with the statement. They can't take the middle road out. I don't have too much of a problem with a fence-setting response set with some of the data that I've collected. I understand that some people do have a problem with this, especially if you're talking about some issue that is either very unclear how you should respond, so people pick no opinion, or if it's something that's extremely controversial, you might get a fence-setting type response set. But for me, it's never been that much of a problem, so I haven't had to remove that middle option. But those are just some things that we might do to make sure that we have the best survey research. All right, so again, we're just briefly going and tapping into observational survey research. Next time, we'll talk about confounding variables in psychological research. Thank you guys, and have a good day. Bye-bye.